Emotional abuse doesn't always scream. It doesn't always threaten. It doesn't always hit. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it sounds like love, concern, or reason. And that's why it leaves such deep scars. This audiobook is about the quiet manipulation, the kind that slowly teaches you to doubt your feelings, minimize your needs, and abandon yourself. If you've ever felt confused instead of hurt, guilty instead of angry, small instead of safe, you're not weak, you were trained. Today we name what was unnamed. We bring awareness to what was hidden. Because what you can see, you can begin to heal. Chapter 1. Emotional abuse often wears a gentle mask. Let's start at the beginning. Not where things explode, not where the damage becomes obvious, but where it feels good. Because emotional abuse rarely begins with cruelty. It begins with charm, with attention, with rescue. At first, you feel seen, chosen, understood. Someone notices you in a way that feels different. They listen intensely. They show up quickly. They make you feel special. And because it feels good, you don't question it. Why would you? It doesn't always threaten. It doesn't always hit. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it sounds like love, concern, or reason. And that's why it leaves such deep scars. This audiobook is about the quiet manipulation, the kind that slowly teaches you to doubt your feelings, minimize your needs, and abandon yourself. If you've ever felt confused instead of hurt, guilty instead of angry, small instead of safe, you're not weak, you were trained. Today we name what was unnamed. We bring awareness to what was hidden. Because what you can see, you can begin to heal. Chapter 1. Emotional abuse often wears a gentle mask. Let's start at the beginning. Not where things explode, not where the damage becomes obvious, but where it feels good. Because emotional abuse rarely begins with cruelty. It begins with charm, with attention, with rescue. At first, you feel seen, chosen, understood. Someone notices you in a way that feels different. They listen intensely. They show up quickly. They make you feel special. And because it feels good, you don't question it. Why would you? Chapter 2. Confusion is a red flag, not a personal flaw. Let's start here because this is where most people get stuck. Not in pain, not in anger, but in confusion. That foggy, exhausting state where nothing feels solid anymore. Where you replay conversations again and again. Where you ask yourself, what did I do wrong? Where you feel unsettled, but you can't point to a single obvious injury. And because you can't point to it, you turn the blame inward. I want to say this clearly, slowly, and more than once. Chronic confusion is not a personality trait. It is not a lack of intelligence. It is not emotional immaturity. It is often the first symptom of emotional manipulation. Confusion is not random. It doesn't come from nowhere. It is created, and it is created for a reason. When someone is emotionally safe, your mind rests. When someone is emotionally unsafe, your mind works over time. Think about that. In healthy relationships, clarity is natural. You may disagree, you may have conflict, but afterward, you feel oriented. You know where you stand. In emotionally manipulative dynamics, you feel the opposite. You feel unmoored, disoriented, like the ground keeps shifting under your feet. And so you review, you replay, you analyze tone, timing, facial expressions, word choice. You dissect the conversation as if there's a hidden answer you missed. You think, if I just understand it better, everything will make sense. But clarity never comes, because confusion isn't the problem. Confusion is the strategy. Let's talk about gaslighting. Not the dramatic movie version gaslighting, not the obvious lies, the subtle kind, the kind that sounds reasonable. It sounds like, "That's not what I said." You're remembering it wrong. You're taking this too personally. "I didn't mean it that way." You're reading into things. Each phrase is small. Each phrase seems harmless. But over time, they do something devastating. They teach you not to trust your own perception. And when you stop trusting your perception, you become confused. That's how it works. Gaslighting doesn't erase reality. It scrambles your access to it. Notice what happens inside you. You feel hurt. Then you feel ashamed for feeling hurt. Then you feel confused about whether the hurt is even valid. And instead of asking, "Why did that hurt me?" you ask, "What's wrong with me?" That's not growth. That's conditioning. And I want you to hear this clearly. Healthy relationships do not require constant mental review. Read that again. Healthy relationships do not require you to replay conversations at 2 a.m. They do not require you to justify your emotions. They do not require you to decode hidden meanings. Clarity brings peace. Confusion keeps you trapped. That phrase matters. We're going to come back to it again and again. Confusion keeps you focused inward. Instead of noticing behavior, you analyze yourself. Instead of setting boundaries, you question your sensitivity. Instead of trusting discomfort, you override it. And that serves the manipulative dynamic perfectly. Because a confused person doesn't act. A confused person waits. You wait for clarity. You wait for reassurance. You wait for things to make sense. Meanwhile, the pattern continues. You have a choice. But you can't see it yet, because confusion narrows your vision. Let me ask you something direct. Have you ever felt more confused after explaining yourself? That's important. In healthy communication, explanation leads to understanding. In manipulative dynamics, explanation leads to more distortion. You explain how you feel. They respond with defensiveness, minimization, or logic that dismisses emotion. You leave feeling smaller, not clearer. And then you think, maybe I didn't explain it well. So you try again. That's how confusion deepens. Here's a truth that might feel uncomfortable. If someone consistently leaves you confused, they are not confused. They may not be consciously malicious, but the outcome is the same. You lose your footing. They maintain control. Because when you're confused, you look to them for orientation. You ask, did I misunderstand? Was I too harsh? What do you think I meant? And slowly, their version of reality becomes the reference point. That's how self-trust erodes. Not in one moment, but in thousands of small ones. Let's slow this down. Confusion feels like tightness in the chest, a buzzing mind, emotional exhaustion, a sense of walking on eggshells, fear of bringing things up again. That's not love. That's hypervigilance. Your nervous system is alert because it doesn't feel safe, and your body knows the truth before your mind is ready to admit it. I want to be very clear here because many people misinterpret this. Discomfort is not always a red flag. Growth can be uncomfortable, but confusion is different. Growth challenges you, then grounds you. Confusion destabilizes you. Growth expands clarity. Confusion contracts it. Clarity brings peace. Confusion keeps you trapped. If something repeatedly leaves you doubting your reality, that's not growth. That's harm. Now let's talk about why you may have stayed confused, because this is where compassion matters. Many people were taught that clarity is selfish, that certainty is arrogance, that trusting yourself is dangerous. You may have learned that being good means being agreeable, that being loving means giving the benefit of the doubt endlessly, that questioning someone else means you're unkind. So when confusion arises, you don't treat it as a warning. You treat it as a flaw. You think, I need to be more patient. I need to be more understanding. I need to work on myself. And again, the focus turns inward. You don't need their permission to trust your experience. Here's a practice I want you to try. Not to fix the relationship, but to reclaim your clarity. When you feel confused, ask one simple question. Do I feel more grounded or more disoriented after interacting with this person? That's it. No analysis, no justification. Just notice. Grounded or disoriented, peaceful or unsettled, clear or foggy. Your body will answer honestly. And when you start trusting that answer, something shifts. You stop chasing explanations. You stop replaying conversations. You stop assuming the problem is you. That's where your power returns. Let me say this plainly. You don't need more information. You need more trust in what you already feel. Confusion keeps you searching. Clarity allows you to stand. And standing doesn't always mean leaving immediately. Sometimes it just means seeing clearly, seeing the pattern, seeing the cost, seeing yourself again. That's the beginning of transformation. Here's the tough love truth. If someone benefits from your confusion, they will not help you. Resolve it. Read that again. If your confusion keeps you compliant, apologetic, or self-doubting, it serves a purpose, and clarity threatens that purpose. That's why clarity often feels dangerous at first, because when you see clearly, you have choices. You have a choice to pause. You have a choice to set boundaries. You have a choice to stop explaining. You have a choice. And here's where we're going next. Once you begin to see confusion as a red flag instead of a flaw, another realization emerges. You'll start to notice how often you've been asked to shrink to keep the peace. How often love has been framed as self-sacrifice. How often your needs have been labeled as too much. That's what we're moving into next. Because emotional abuse doesn't just confuse you. It teaches you to erase yourself. And that's what we'll name in the next chapter. You don't need their permission. You don't need to stay confused. Clarity brings peace. Chapter 3. Love should not require self-erasure. Let's be very honest now. Confusion was the doorway, but self-erasure is the room many people end up living in. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens quietly, gradually, through adaptation. You don't wake up one day and decide to disappear. You learn to shrink because it feels safer. Emotional abuse doesn't always demand that you change. Sometimes it just rewards you when you do. You notice that when you're agreeable, things are calm. When you're quiet, there's less tension. When you don't ask for much, you're easier to love. So you adapt. Not because you're weak, but because you're wired for connection. Human beings will abandon themselves before they abandon attachment. Let that land. At first, it feels like compromise. You tell yourself, this isn't a big deal. I can let this go. It's not worth the argument. And sometimes that's true. But in emotionally abusive dynamics, the compromise only moves in one direction. Your direction. Your preferences soften. Your boundaries blur. Your voice lowers. Not because you don't have needs anymore, but because you've learned that expressing them has consequences. Let's talk about those labels. Too much. Selfish. Dramatic. Sensitive. High maintenance. These words are not descriptions. They are tools. tools that teach you to mistrust your own needs. When your sadness is called dramatic, you learn to swallow it. When your anger is called overreaction, you learn to suppress it. When your desires are called selfish, you learn to feel ashamed of them. And slowly, you stop asking, not because you don't need, but because you don't want to be punished for needing. Here's something important to understand. Your needs did not suddenly become excessive. The environment became unsafe for them. Notice what happens inside you over time. You start pre-editing yourself. You think before you speak. Is this worth it? Will this upset them? Am I asking for too much? You monitor your tone. You soften your words. You downplay your emotions. And then one day, you realize something painful. You don't know what you want anymore, because you've been orienting around someone else's comfort for so long. That's self-erasure. Let me say this clearly, and I will repeat it until it sinks in. Love expands you. It does not erase you. Healthy love makes room for your full range, your joy and your grief, your boundaries and your needs, your no as much as your yes. If you have to disappear to be loved, that is not intimacy. That's survival. And survival feels like this. You feel tired all the time. You feel resentful but guilty for feeling it. You feel lonely even when you're not alone. You feel like you're too much and not enough at the same time. That contradiction is not accidental. It keeps you striving, trying harder, giving more, asking less. That's how self-erasure is maintained. Let's be very direct now. If expressing your truth consistently leads to withdrawal, punishment, or ridicule, you are not in a safe emotional environment. That's not a moral judgment. It's an observation. And you have a choice. You always have a choice. Many people confuse self-erasure with being loving. They think love means endurance, forgiveness without repair, empathy without limits. But love without self-respect becomes self-abandonment. And self-abandonment is not noble. It's costly. You pay with your energy, your creativity, your sense of self. Eventually, your body starts protesting. Anxiety, depression, numbness. These are not personal failures. They are signals. Let me slow this down. You were not too much as a child. You were not too much in your feelings. You were not too much in your needs. You were human. And somewhere along the way, you learned that being human was inconvenient to someone else. So you adjusted. That adjustment may have kept you connected, but it cost you yourself. Here's another hard truth. If someone benefits from you having fewer needs, they will not encourage you to have more. Read that again. If your silence keeps the peace, your voice will feel threatening. And that's why reclaiming yourself often creates tension. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because the old pattern is being disrupted. Reclaiming yourself does not start with confrontation. It starts with permission. Permission to feel what you feel without editing. Permission to want what you want without apology. Permission to notice when something hurts. You don't need their permission. You never did. Here's a simple practice. When you feel the urge to shrink, pause. Ask yourself, what am I about to give up right now? Your honesty, your boundary, your rest, your truth? Just notice, because awareness interrupts the pattern, and interruption creates choice. Let me say this again, because repetition matters. Losing yourself is not the price of intimacy. If connection requires you to disappear, it is not connection. It is compliance. And compliance breeds resentment, not love. Some of you may feel fear rising right now. If I stop shrinking, I'll lose them. If I speak up, things will fall apart. If I choose myself, I'll be alone. That fear is understandable. But here's the truth beneath it. If you can only be loved when you are smaller, you are not being loved for who you are. You are being tolerated for how convenient you are. That's not safety. Choosing yourself doesn't always mean leaving immediately. Sometimes it means seeing clearly, seeing how much you've given, seeing how little room there's been for you, seeing the cost of staying invisible. Clarity brings peace, even when it brings grief first. Here's what I want you to take with you from this chapter. You are not too much. You are not selfish for having needs. You are not dramatic for having feelings. You are allowed to take up space in your own life. And in the next chapter, we're going to look at one of the most deceptive forms of emotional abuse. The one that hides behind kindness, behind protection, behind concern. Because control doesn't always look like force. Sometimes it sounds like care. And learning to tell the difference will change everything. Love expands you. It does not erase you. Chapter 4. Control can sound like concern. This is where many people get confused again. Because this form of emotional abuse doesn't look cruel. It doesn't sound angry. It doesn't raise its voice. It sounds caring. It sounds like, I just want to make sure you're okay. I worry about you. I'm only asking because I care. I'm trying to protect you. And because it sounds loving, it's one of the hardest patterns to see. Let's be very clear from the beginning. Concern and control are not the same thing, but they can use the same words. Care is spacious, control is tightening. Care asks, then trusts. Control asks, then monitors. Care respects your autonomy. Control replaces it. Say that with me. Care respects autonomy. Control replaces it. We'll come back to that. In healthy relationships, concern sounds like this. Let me know if you need anything. I trust you to decide. I'm here if you want support. And then it stops. There is space. There is trust. There is room for you to move freely. In emotionally abusive dynamics, concern doesn't end. It follows you. Monitoring is one of the earliest signs. It starts small. Questions that feel reasonable. Who are you with? What time will you be home? Why didn't you respond sooner? Where were you exactly? At first, you answer easily, because you're not doing anything wrong. But notice how the questions don't lead to reassurance. They lead to more questions, more details, more justification, more explaining. And slowly, you feel something shift. You feel watched. Being watched is not the same as being cared for. When someone truly cares, you feel supported. When someone controls, you feel scrutinized. Your nervous system knows the difference. You start anticipating questions. You preemptively explain. You feel a low-level tension even when nothing is happening. That's not safety. That's surveillance. Let's talk about checking in. Because this is where control hides best. Checking in can be loving. But in abusive dynamics, checking in isn't about connection. It's about regulation. They check in to regulate their anxiety, not to support your autonomy. And when you don't respond the right way or fast enough, the tone changes. Concern becomes irritation. Worry becomes accusation. Care becomes pressure. That's how you know. Here's an important distinction. Care feels optional. Control feels obligatory. Care allows you to say no. Control punishes you when you do. Now let's talk about restriction. Because control often shows up as limits, disguised as protection. They might say, "I don't think that's safe for you. Those people aren't good for you. You're better off not doing that. I just don't trust that environment." And again, each sentence sounds reasonable until you notice a pattern. The circle of your life gets smaller. Fewer friends, fewer activities, less independence. Not because you chose it, but because it became easier to comply than to explain. That's control. Protection does not isolate you. Protection does not require permission. Protection does not remove your agency. If someone's concern consistently limits your freedom, it's not protection, it's possession. And possession is not love. Let me say something very directly. Trust does not require surveillance. If someone trusts you, they don't need constant updates. They don't need access to everything. They don't need to track, monitor, or verify. Trust rests. Control watches. Many people struggle here because they were taught that jealousy equals love, that intensity equals care. But jealousy that restricts you is not romantic. It's destabilizing. And when you internalize it, you start restricting yourself. You stop going places. You stop reaching out. You stop doing things that might cause issues. Not because they asked you to, but because you learned it was easier not to. That's how control becomes internalized. Notice this carefully. You're not being told what to do. You're being trained to do it yourself. That's the most effective form of control. And here's where self-erasure deepens. You begin to check in with their comfort instead of your own intuition. You ask, will this upset them? Is this allowed? Is this worth the reaction? You don't ask, do I want this? Does this feel right to me? Is this aligned with who I am? That shift is not accidental. It's the result of repeated subtle pressure. Let's pause. This is important. If someone truly cares about you, they want you to be empowered. They want you to grow. They want you to choose freely. Control wants predictability, not growth. Control wants reassurance, not truth. Control wants compliance. And compliance is quiet. Here's another way to tell the difference. Care can tolerate your independence. Control feels threatened by it. Care celebrates your connections. Control competes with them. Care trusts your judgment. Control undermines it. Care respects autonomy. Control replaces it. That phrase matters. Some of you may be thinking, but they had good intentions. Intent does not erase impact. Someone can mean well and still cause harm. What matters is not what they say they're doing. What matters is how you feel over time. Do you feel more confident, more free, more grounded? Or do you feel smaller, more cautious, more anxious? Your body keeps the score. Let's talk about why this is so hard to leave or challenge. Because when control sounds like concern, pushing back feels cruel. You worry. I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to seem ungrateful. I don't want to be misunderstood. And so you comply again. But listen carefully. You are not responsible for managing someone else's anxiety by giving up your autonomy. You are not required to sacrifice your freedom to prove love. You don't need their permission. Here's a grounding truth. Love that requires restriction is not love, it's fear. And fear does not create safety. Now here's the tough love part. If someone reacts poorly when you assert independence, that reaction tells you everything. Healthy care adjusts. Control escalates. Healthy care listens. Control defends itself. Healthy care respects your no control, argues with it. That's how you know. Reclaiming your autonomy doesn't mean becoming reckless. It means becoming honest. Honest about what you want. Honest about what feels intrusive. Honest about where your boundaries are. And boundaries are not punishments. They are information. They tell others how to love you without losing yourself. Here's a simple practice. When someone frames restriction as concern, ask yourself one question. Does this increase my sense of agency or decrease it? Agency feels like choice. Restriction feels like pressure. Your answer matters. Let me repeat this, because repetition builds clarity. You don't need to be monitored to be loved. You don't need to be restricted to be safe. You don't need to give up autonomy to earn care. Trust does not require surveillance. And here's where we're going next. Once you start noticing control, disguised as concern, you'll also begin to notice something else. How guilt is used to keep you compliant. How boundaries are met with disappointment. How independence is framed as betrayal. That's what we're moving into next. Because guilt is one of the most powerful tools of emotional abuse. And once you see it clearly, it loses its grip. Care respects autonomy. Control replaces it. Chapter 5. Guilt is the abuser's favorite tool. Let's talk about guilt. Not the healthy kind. Not the kind that helps you repair harm or take responsibility. We're talking about quiet guilt. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that seeps in. Because emotional abuse doesn't always operate through fear. Often it operates through guilt. Fear makes people run. Guilt makes people stay. Fear triggers resistance. Guilt triggers self-doubt. And when guilt is activated, you don't think, this is wrong. You think, I'm wrong. That shift matters. Guilt in emotionally abusive dynamics rarely sounds harsh. It sounds disappointed. It sounds wounded. It sounds like, I guess I just don't matter that much to you. I wouldn't do that to you. After everything I've done for you. I thought you cared. No yelling, no threats. Just enough emotional weight to make you fold. That's the strategy. Let's slow this down. Guilt works by assigning responsibility where it doesn't belong. You start feeling responsible for their mood, their reactions, their sense of worth, their emotional stability. And once that happens, your behavior changes. You monitor yourself. You anticipate their feelings. You soften your needs. Not because you want to, but because you don't want to hurt them. That's how guilt controls. Here's the hard truth. If someone consistently feels hurt when you assert a boundary, the issue is not your boundary. It's their entitlement. Boundaries are neutral. They are not punishments. They are not attacks. They are information. But in emotionally abusive dynamics, boundaries are treated like betrayals. You say no. And instead of discussion, you get silence, withdrawal, coldness, disappointment. Not explicitly stated, but deeply felt. And your nervous system picks up the message. If I protect myself, I will lose connection. So next time, you don't say no. You preemptively comply. That's how guilt becomes internalized. Notice what happens. You start editing your needs before they ever reach your mouth. You think, I don't want to upset them. It's not worth the fallout. I can handle it. And again, you disappear a little more. Let me say this clearly. Guilt that silences you is not love. Repeat that. Guilt that silences you is not love. Love does not require self-suppression to survive. Love does not punish honesty. Love does not withdraw to teach lessons. That's not care. That's control. Many people confuse guilt with empathy. They think, if I feel bad, it means I'm being compassionate. But compassion doesn't erase you. Compassion does not require self-betrayal. You can care about someone's feelings without being responsible for them. That's the distinction, and that distinction changes everything. Let's talk about emotional responsibility. In healthy relationships, each person is responsible for their own emotional regulation. Feelings are shared, not assigned. Support is offered, not demanded. In abusive dynamics, emotions are outsourced. One person becomes the emotional caretaker. Responsibility flows in one direction, your direction. You are not responsible for managing someone else's emotional state. Say it again. You are not responsible for managing someone else's emotional state. You didn't cause their feelings. You can't control them. And it is not your job to fix them, even if you love them, especially if you love them. Guilt keeps you entangled. It keeps you explaining. It keeps you apologizing. It keeps you over-functioning. And over time, you forget what your original need even was. Because the focus shifts from, what do I need, to, how do I keep them okay? That shift is not love, it's survival. Here's something important to notice. Guilt often shows up after you do something healthy. You rest, you take space, you say no, you assert a need, and suddenly, there it is. The heaviness, the doubt, the urge to take it back. That's not coincidence, that's conditioning. Ask yourself this. When you feel guilty, does it lead to repair and growth, or does it lead to silence and compliance? Healthy guilt leads to accountability. Toxic guilt leads to self-erasure. That's the difference. Let's talk about disappointment, because disappointment is one of the most powerful guilt weapons, not expressed loudly, just felt. You sense it in their tone, in their withdrawal, in their sighs, and because you care, you rush to fix it. You say, I didn't mean it that way. I can change. It's not that important. And again, your needs disappear. Here's the tough love truth. If someone's disappointment controls your behavior, you are not free. Freedom does not mean lack of care. It means choice. You have a choice. But guilt makes that choice feel dangerous. Let me repeat something essential. You don't need their permission to have boundaries. Boundaries are not negotiations. They are statements of truth, and someone who truly cares will want to understand them, not punish you for having them. This part may be hard to hear. Some people rely on guilt because it works. They may not be conscious of it. They may even believe they are the victim, but the outcome is the same. You feel smaller. They feel centered. And over time, that imbalance becomes normalized. Here's a grounding practice. When guilt arises, pause, ask, did I do something harmful, or did I do something healthy? Not uncomfortable, not unfamiliar, harmful or healthy. If it was healthy, the guilt does not belong to you. You can let it pass. This takes practice, because guilt is persuasive. It speaks in familiar voices. It uses your kindness against you. But kindness without boundaries is self-neglect, and self-neglect is not sustainable. Let me say this again, slowly. Guilt that silences you is not love. Love invites honesty. Love tolerates difference. Love does not require you to suffer quietly. You deserve relationships where your well-being matters too. As we move into the next chapter, something important will become clear. Guilt is powerful, but it often works alongside something else. Silence. Withdrawal. The absence that teaches you to fall back in line. That's what we'll explore next, because silence can be just as loud as words, and once you see how it's used, you stop chasing it. You don't need their permission. You have a choice. Chapter 6. Invalidation teaches you not to trust yourself. Let's name what invalidation really does. It doesn't just hurt your feelings. It doesn't just cause arguments. Invalidation rewires your relationship with yourself. Invalidation is subtle. It doesn't always say, "You're wrong." Sometimes it says, "You're overthinking. You're too sensitive." That's not a big deal. You're being emotional. Let's be rational. Each phrase sounds reasonable. Each phrase sounds calm. And each phrase moves you one step further away from your inner signals. Your emotions are not treated as information. They are treated as problems. And when emotions are framed as problems, you learn to distrust them. You start thinking, "I shouldn't feel this way. I'm making this up. I need to get over it." And instead of asking why something hurts, you ask what's wrong with you. That's how self-trust erodes. Let's slow this down. Emotions exist for a reason. They are signals. They are data. They are your internal navigation system. Pain signals harm. Fear signals threat. Anger signals boundary violation. Sadness signals loss. But when someone consistently rationalizes your emotions away, the message is clear. Your internal experience is unreliable. That message is devastating. And here's the part many people miss. Invalidation doesn't require cruelty. It can be gentle, logical, even well-intentioned. They might say, "I'm just trying to help you see it differently. You're taking this personally. You need to calm down before we talk." Again, reasonable on the surface, but notice the outcome. Your experience is dismissed. Your feelings are corrected. Your reality is adjusted. That's the pattern. Let me say this clearly and repeatedly. Your feelings are not evidence of failure. They are information. Say it again. Your feelings are not evidence of failure. They are information. They tell you what's happening inside you. They do not need permission to exist. Emotional safety is not about agreement. It's about being believed. Someone can disagree with your perspective and still honor your experience. But invalidation skips belief and jumps straight to correction. It says, "Here's why you shouldn't feel that way. Here's the logic that cancels your emotion. Here's the explanation that makes your pain unnecessary." And slowly, you stop bringing things up. Not because they don't matter, but because you've learned the outcome. Over time, something dangerous happens. You begin to pre-invalidate yourself. You catch your emotions before anyone else can. You think, "I'm probably overreacting. This is stupid. I shouldn't feel this way." That voice didn't start as yours. It was taught, and now it runs automatically. This is how invalidation becomes internalized. The external voice disappears. The internal one takes over. Let's talk about self-trust. Self-trust is not confidence. It's not certainty. Self-trust is the willingness to listen to yourself, even when you're uncomfortable, even when you're unsure, even when others disagree. And invalidation teaches you not to do that. It teaches you to override yourself. Notice how this shows up. You feel something in your body. Tightness, unease, a sense that something is off, and instead of honoring it, you rationalize it away. You think, "They didn't mean it. I'm being dramatic. It's not that bad. And the signal fades, not because the issue is gone, but because you stop listening. Let me be very clear. Ignoring your inner signals does not make you more mature. It makes you more disconnected. And disconnection from self is the foundation of emotional abuse. Here's another hard truth. Someone who consistently invalidates your emotions is not interested in understanding you. They are interested in maintaining control of the narrative, because emotions disrupt logic. Emotions introduce needs. Emotions demand change, and invalidation keeps everything the same. Let's pause here. This is not about blaming. It's about seeing clearly. You are not weak for adapting. You are trying to stay connected. But now you're waking up, and waking up requires a different relationship with your inner world. Here's a simple practice to begin rebuilding self-trust. When you feel something, name it silently. I feel hurt. I feel uneasy. I feel angry. No explanation, no justification. Just naming. That act alone begins to reverse invalidation. Next, ask yourself one question. What might this feeling be trying to tell me? Not, is this logical? Not, is this reasonable? But, what information is here? Because feelings are information. Let me repeat it again. Your feelings are not evidence of failure. They are information. This repetition matters, because your system has learned the opposite, and unlearning takes time. Self-trust erodes slowly. That means it can be rebuilt slowly, through small acts of listening, through honoring discomfort, through stopping the automatic self-correction. Each time you take yourself seriously, you reclaim a piece of yourself. That's the work. Here's the tough love part. If someone cannot tolerate your emotions, they cannot offer emotional safety. And emotional safety is not optional in intimacy. It's foundational. As we move into the next chapter, something else will come into focus. What happens when invalidation is combined with silence? When emotions are not just corrected, but ignored? When communication is withdrawn to regain control? That's what we'll explore next, because silence can teach you just as much as words, and learning to recognize it will free you from chasing connection that disappears. You have a choice. And Chapter 7. Silence can be a weapon. Silence is not always peaceful. Sometimes silence is violent, not in what it does to the body, but in what it does to the nervous system. We need to be very precise here, because silence is often misunderstood. There is healthy silence, and there is abusive silence. They are not the same, and confusing the two keeps people trapped for years. Healthy silence brings space. It allows emotions to settle. It creates room for reflection. It comes with clarity, reassurance, and return. Abusive silence brings fear. It feels like disappearance. It feels like abandonment. It feels like punishment. Say it with me. Healthy silence brings space. Abusive silence brings fear. That distinction matters. In emotionally abusive dynamics, silence is not neutral. It is strategic. Communication doesn't pause because someone needs time. It stops because someone wants control. Let's talk about what this looks like. You express a feeling. You set a boundary. You say no. You disagree. And suddenly, they pull away. No texts. No warmth, no eye contact, no presence, not explained, not discussed, just absence, and your nervous system goes on high alert. Here's what happens inside you. You feel anxious, panicked, responsible, desperate to fix it. You replay what you said. You wonder if you went too far. You feel the urge to apologize, even if you did nothing wrong. That's not coincidence. That's conditioning. Silence in this context is not about cooling off. It's about retraining behavior. It teaches you. Don't bring that up. Don't set that boundary. Don't upset me. Because when you do, connection disappears. That's how silence becomes a weapon. Let me say this clearly. Withholding affection, communication, or presence is a form of punishment, even if it's never named, even if it's subtle, even if it's wrapped in, "I just need space." Intent matters less than impact, and the impact is fear. Now here's where it gets dangerous. You start chasing connection. Not because you want closeness, but because you want relief. Relief from the tension, relief from the uncertainty, relief from the fear of abandonment. So you reach out. You soften. You apologize. You take back your boundary. Not because you changed your mind, but because you want the silence to stop. Over time, you learn something very specific. Connection is conditional. It depends on your compliance. And slowly, you stop asserting yourself because you don't want to pay the price. Let's pause. This is important. Love does not disappear to teach lessons. Say it again. Love does not disappear to teach lessons. Love does not withhold presence to gain leverage. Love does not use absence as discipline. That is not love. That is control. Many people excuse this behavior by saying they just need time. They're processing. They're avoiding conflict. And sometimes that's true. But here's how you tell the difference. Healthy space comes with communication. Abusive silence comes with ambiguity. Healthy space sounds like, "I need some time, and I'll check back in later." Abusive silence sounds like nothing, and that nothing is loud. Let's talk about the nervous system again, because this isn't about being dramatic. It's biological. When connection is suddenly withdrawn, your body interprets it as threat, especially if you have any history of abandonment or emotional neglect. Your system goes into survival mode. You don't think clearly. You don't advocate for yourself. You try to restore safety. That's why silence works. And here's the most painful part. You begin to associate your authenticity with loss. You learn that being honest leads to disappearance. So you choose connection over truth. Again and again. That's self-erasure reinforced. Let me be very clear. Silence that creates fear is not a boundary. It's a tactic. Boundaries are stated. They are clear. They are respectful. Silence leaves you guessing, and guessing keeps you powerless. Some people use silence unconsciously. They may not see it as punishment, but the effect is the same. You are trained to self-censor, and over time you become quieter, smaller, easier. That's not healing, that's harm. Here's another truth that might be hard to hear. If someone consistently uses silence after you assert yourself, they are showing you how they handle power. They don't negotiate. They withdraw. They don't engage. They disappear. And that tells you something important about emotional safety. Emotional safety requires presence, even during conflict, especially during conflict. Silence that removes presence removes safety. And without safety, intimacy cannot survive. Let's talk about what this does to your sense of worth. You start believing, "I'm too much. I should have kept quiet. I ruined things. But listen carefully. You didn't ruin anything. You revealed something. And the silence revealed more. Here's a grounding question to ask yourself. When silence happens, ask, does this invite repair or enforce compliance? Repair leads to reconnection with integrity. Compliance leads to reconnection through self-betrayal. Your answer matters. Now, this is important. Choosing not to chase silence does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop abandoning yourself. It means you let the silence speak. And what it says is information, just like your emotions. Remember this phrase: healthy silence brings space. Abusive silence brings fear. If the silence makes you feel unsafe, small, or desperate, it is not healthy. And you are not wrong for reacting. Your body is responding to withdrawal. Let me say something very directly. If someone can only be present when you are compliant, they are not present. They are conditional. And conditional presence is not intimacy. As we come to the end of this chapter, I want to connect this to what comes next. Silence is powerful, but it often works alongside something else: invalidation, guilt, control. And when you start seeing these patterns together, a bigger truth emerges. You begin to realize that awareness itself is an act of self-respect, that seeing clearly is not betrayal, it's liberation. That's where we're going next, because once you see the pattern, you can no longer unsee it. And that's when healing truly begins. You have a choice. You don't need their permission. Love does not disappear to teach lessons. Chapter 8. Awareness is the first act of self-respect. Everything changes here, not because the relationship suddenly improves, not because someone apologizes or takes responsibility. Everything changes because you see. Awareness is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, often with grief. You start noticing patterns instead of isolated incidents. You stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "What is happening here?" That shift is subtle, but it's irreversible. Naming emotional abuse breaks its power, not by creating conflict, but by restoring orientation. You are no longer lost in confusion. You are no longer blaming yourself for everything. You are no longer searching for explanations that never come. You see the pattern, and once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Many people resist this moment because awareness brings loss of illusion, loss of hope that this time will be different, loss of the fantasy that if you just try harder, things will improve. But awareness also brings something else: relief, the kind of relief that comes from realizing you're not broken. Let me say this clearly: you are not overreacting. You are awakening. There is a difference. Overreacting is impulsive and disorganized. Awakening is slow, grounded, and clear. Overreacting seeks validation. Awakening seeks truth. Awakening often feels uncomfortable because it dismantles the story you told yourself to survive, the story that said, "They didn't mean it. It's not that bad. I'm too sensitive." Those stories helped you stay connected. They helped you cope. But they also kept you small. And now, you're ready to grow. Self-blame is the last defense of the abusive pattern. As long as you blame yourself, nothing has to change. And that's why self-compassion is so threatening. Self-compassion shifts responsibility back where it belongs, not with accusation, with clarity. Self-compassion does not say, "They're bad." It says, "I matter." Many people misunderstand the self-compassion. They think it means excusing harm. It doesn't. It means acknowledging impact. It means saying, something here hurts me, and that matters. That's not weakness. That's integrity. Here's an important truth. You cannot heal what you keep minimizing. Minimization is a survival strategy, but it delays healing. Awareness ends minimization, and that's why it feels destabilizing at first. Let's talk about courage, not the kind that looks bold, the quiet kind, the kind that notices patterns, the kind that stops making excuses, the kind that tells the truth internally, even if nothing changes externally yet. Seeing clearly is an act of courage. Say it again. Seeing clearly is an act of courage, because clarity disrupts old agreements, even unspoken ones. When you stop questioning your worth, something shifts. You stop asking, am I too much? Am I asking for too much? Do I deserve better? You start asking, does this align with my well-being? Does this feel safe? Is this nourishing? That's a different orientation, and it's powerful. Healing does not start with leaving. It starts with no longer abandoning yourself. You may still be in the relationship. You may still be figuring things out. But internally, something has changed. You are no longer at war with yourself. Awareness brings choice. Choice doesn't always mean immediate action. Sometimes it means pause. Sometimes it means gathering strength. Sometimes it means setting internal boundaries before external ones. All of that counts. Here's something important. You don't owe anyone continued access to you at the cost of your sanity. That doesn't mean punishment. It means self-respect. And self-respect begins internally. Let's pause and ground this. Right now, in this moment, you are listening. That means you are already practicing awareness. You are already interrupting old patterns. You are already choosing yourself. That matters. Let me say this again. Healing begins the moment you stop questioning your worth. Not when someone else changes, not when you get closure, but when you decide that your experience matters. As we come toward the end of this chapter, something becomes clear. Awareness is not the end, it's the beginning. And once awareness is present, the next step becomes unavoidable. You begin to ask, how do I live differently now that I see? That's what we'll move into next, because awareness without action becomes painful. But awareness with intention becomes liberation. You have a choice. You don't need their permission. Seeing clearly is an act of courage. Emotional abuse thrives in secrecy, confusion, and self-doubt. Healing begins with awareness, compassion, and truth. You don't need to prove your pain. You don't need permission to protect your peace. You don't need to stay small to be loved. Let this be the moment you turn toward yourself, with honesty, with kindness, with strength. If this audiobook gave language to something you felt but couldn't name, let it remind you, you are not broken. You are waking up, and waking up is the beginning of freedom.